The sun was dipping low behind the coastline, staining the evening sky with streaks of amber and violet. A soft breeze rolled in from the sea, carrying with it the scent of salt and the distant cries of gulls. For most people, this was the hour of peace, a time to walk, to breathe, to forget. But for General Alexandra Voss, peace was a stranger she rarely met. After 30 years in the Marine Corps, countless operations, losses, and medals, she was finally on leave. No briefings, no chain of command, no soldiers calling her ma'am. Just a quiet coastal town where nobody knew her name. She traded her uniform for jeans and a hoodie, her boots for sandals. For once, she wanted to feel human again. But sometimes, fate doesn't allow warriors to rest. As she walked through a narrow street toward a small diner, laughter echoed from a nearby alley, sharp, crude laughter that immediately made her senses sharpen. Years of combat had trained her to read danger not by sight, but by tone. She paused. In the reflection of a car window, she saw 3 men, young, restless, and clearly drunk. At first, she ignored them. She'd seen 1,000 like them before, lost boys looking for meaning in mockery. But when one of them whistled and shouted, "Hey, lady, what's the rush? Come have a drink with us," she turned slowly. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet warning. "No, thank you," she said calmly and kept walking. The group didn't like that answer. One of them, tall and broad with tattoos crawling up his neck, stepped forward. "Hey, we're talking to you. You think you're too good for us?" She didn't respond. She'd been stared down by insurgents with rifles, by generals with egos. These boys were nothing. Still, she knew how quickly pride could turn to violence. She reached for her phone discreetly, her thumb hovering over a single contact, one she never thought she'd use off-duty. The tallest thug smirked, circling closer. "Where you headed, Grandma? Gonna call your husband?" Alexandra looked him straight in the eye. Her voice was steady, cold. "No, I'm going to call someone else." That amused him. "Oh yeah, who? The police?" She smiled faintly. "No, they take too long." He didn't even have time to laugh again before she moved. One twist, one sidestep, and the man found himself face down on the pavement with his arm locked painfully behind his back. His friends froze, shock flashing across their faces. "What the? How did?" one stammered. "Walk away," she said softly. "I don't want to hurt you. But pride makes fools brave." The other 2 lunged at her. For a brief second, time seemed to slow. The general's instincts, honed through decades of battle, took over. One blow to the knee, a swift elbow strike to the throat, and silence filled the alley. The fight was over before it even began. She stood over them, calm but breathing heavily, her hands trembling not from fear, but from something else. Anger, sadness, weariness. She hadn't wanted this. She just wanted peace. But peace, it seemed, had to be fought for, even on vacation. As she walked away, one of the men, gasping on the ground, spat out, "You're dead, old lady. You don't know who we are." She paused, turned slightly, and said with quiet steel, "You don't know who I am either." She left the alley and entered the small diner nearby. The waitress, a kind older woman, noticed her bruised knuckles and asked softly, "Rough night?" Alexandra forced a small smile. "Just a misunderstanding." She ordered coffee, but before she could take a sip, she noticed something through the window, a shadow of movement. The same men, now joined by others, maybe 5 or 6 more, were gathering outside. They looked angry, desperate. She sighed. It seemed the night wasn't done testing her. Pulling out her phone, she dialed that number, the one she had sworn never to use unless it was life or death. "Command," a voice answered almost instantly. "Identify." "Voss. Code Alpha 27. Emergency assist. Civilian location. Non-lethal response preferred." There was a pause, then the calm voice replied, "Understood, General. Response team inbound. ETA 12 minutes." She hung up. 12 minutes, that was an eternity when you were surrounded. Moments later, the door burst open. The thugs stormed in, filling the small diner with tension. The customers froze, the waitress dropped a tray. The leader, the same man she'd put down earlier, stepped forward with a wild look in his eyes. "Thought you could walk away, huh?" he snarled. "Now we're gonna teach you some respect." Alexandra stood up slowly. "You had your chance to walk away. I gave you mercy." "Mercy?" He laughed cruelly. "You think you're some kind of soldier?" She didn't answer. Instead, she simply said, 10 minutes. He frowned. "What?" She looked him dead in the eye. That's how long you have left to make a choice that'll change your life. The tension was electric. The men laughed again, thinking she was bluffing. But something in her tone, that unshakable authority, that quiet confidence, made one of them hesitate. And then, in the distance, they heard it. The low hum of rotors. At first faint, then growing louder, vibrating the windows. The leader turned toward the sound, his face twisting from arrogance to confusion. What the hell is that? Alexandra's eyes didn't move. That, she said, is what happens when you cross a Marine general. Outside, lights swept over the street as a helicopter descended toward the nearby park. Black SUVs screeched around the corner. Within seconds, the air was filled with the synchronized shouts of tactical commands. Special forces, hands where we can see them. The thugs froze, disbelief plastered on their faces. Soldiers in full gear stormed the area, moving with precision, disciplined, fast, and silent. The customers inside the diner gasped as the elite unit secured the perimeter. The leader tried to speak, but his voice broke. You called the army. Alexandra finally stood, stepping toward him. No, I called my family. That broke him. He dropped to his knees, hands trembling. His friends followed, too terrified to move. The soldiers entered the diner, saluted sharply. Ma'am, one said, his voice steady but filled with respect. Are you hurt? She shook her head. No, Sergeant, just disappointed. He nodded, understanding. As the situation de-escalated, the bystanders slowly began to realize who she truly was. Whispers filled the room, a general. A Marine general, here, and admiration replaced fear. But Alexandra wasn't proud, she felt heavy. All she had wanted was one peaceful night, a reminder that the world wasn't always hostile. Yet once again, violence had found her. Later, sitting outside the diner with a cup of coffee finally cooling in her hands, one of the young soldiers approached quietly. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. She nodded. Why didn't you just fight them off again? You could have handled it. She smiled faintly. Because sometimes, son, the strongest thing a soldier can do is show restraint. He looked thoughtful, then saluted again. Understood, ma'am. As the troops departed and the thugs were taken into custody, the general remained sitting under the starlit sky. For the first time that night, she felt the weight of everything she'd lived through, the wars, the loss, the endless battles. She realized how deeply she longed for peace, not just for herself, but for the world. Hours later, she walked along the beach. The tide rolled in softly, washing over her boots. The moon hung low and silver, reflecting off the waves. For the first time in years, she let herself feel small, not a leader, not a warrior, just a person. And then, she smiled. Because even though she couldn't escape who she was, she could still choose how she used that strength. Not to dominate, but to protect. Not to command fear, but to inspire respect. Somewhere deep down, she knew those thugs would remember that night. Maybe they'd change, maybe they wouldn't, but at least, she'd given them a chance, a lesson that true power doesn't come from fists or weapons, but from control, discipline, and compassion. As the waves whispered against the shore, she whispered back to herself, once a Marine, always a protector. And with that, she walked into the dawn. Epilogue voiceover style for YouTube. They say heroes are born on battlefields. But the truth is, heroes are made in the moments when no one's watching. When the easy choice is violence, but the right choice is peace. General Alexandra Voss didn't just command armies. She commanded herself. And that's what made her unstoppable. So, if you ever feel powerless, remember this story. Strength isn't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you stand for what's right, even when the world tests you. Because real warriors don't fight for glory. They fight for peace.